All right, joining the show now is Chris Lambert to discuss NBA playoffs and what's next for some of the eliminated teams. But first things first, how you doing today, Chris?
Great, man. Thank you so much for having me on again. It's good to be back, and I'm excited to talk about some playoff basketball, man. It's been great this year.
Absolutely, it's been a ton of fun. We got a lot to talk about, and frankly, I don't think there's a better place to start than with our Boston Celtics, who are currently tied 3-3 against the 76ers, going into a Game 7 tomorrow on Saturday. The Celtics were up 3-1 in this series, obviously heavy favorites heading in as the 2 seed, but what have you made of these past few games for the Celtics, and how are you feeling heading into Game 7?
I'm in an interesting spot because the Celtics, to me at least, they haven't even been playing that bad. It's just they're getting the looks they want. The execution just hasn't been there, and I think they weren't at all expecting Joel Embiid to play in this series, and he has just thrown an absolute wrench into their plans. Kata has just looked lost defensively, and I don't know. I'm if Philly can get the job done in Game 7, I could see them really putting up a fight against the Knicks because they have a big three, and Paul George has really bought into playing that role and being just a 3-and-D wing. I don't know. I have mixed feelings on it. I also think it's the awkwardness of Jaylen Brown trying to get back to being not a number two per se, but having to share pretty much every single offensive touch with another forward who also, is isolation based and likes to create his own shot and get in rhythm like Tatum does. So it's been a hard watch as someone who supports the Celtics.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been a hard watch over these past two games, especially. And I mean, even going back to that game three in Philly, that was a bit of a nerve
Yeah.
wracking watch as well. But yeah, I mean, in general, I think this is sort of a good reminder of why the Celtics had such low expectations heading into the season. A lot of the concerns have really popped up, especially with that center rotation, despite the excellent regular season that they had, and despite me and many other Celtics fans sort of buying into a potential finals run. I think this series has really exposed some of their weaknesses, whether they win in Game 7 or not. I do have significant concerns about their ability to beat the Knicks and ultimately come out of the East. I think the center rotation is my biggest concern right now with Kata and Vucevic both really struggling. I think you could have one of them in a backup role and it would be fine. You're probably going to lose those minutes, but when you have just those two centers, that's not great. And honestly, throughout the series, I've wanted the Celtics to go to Tatum at the 5 a little bit more, and they just
I
haven't really
agree.
pulled that lever.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel so bad criticizing Joe Mazzulla because he's a legitimate basketball genius and he knows 100,000 times more basketball than I
Yeah.
ever will. But there have been a couple of bad moments in this series, in my opinion, and I think that's one of them. Another thing that I just don't love from Mazzulla this series is not utilizing that depth that the Celtics really thrived on throughout the regular season. I think it's a little bit puzzling that Baylor Shireman hasn't played more so 15, 20 minutes a game. He's sort of in those single digits most of the time, and I think he could provide them with a real scoring punch as well as some nice defense and playmaking, and I feel like that's really lacking in some of these Walsh Hauser minutes. You're really trading off one end of the floor with both of those guys, and I mean, the other factor I think that needs to be discussed here is Derek White, who has just
Oh,
continued to
yeah.
really struggle shooting the ball from
And
beyond the arc.
he's such a winner. Like there was countless plays in the fourth quarter of that game where I'm like, damn, Derek White is incredible, but just the shot is just atrocious right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I was going to ask how much of sort of the Celtics' offensive struggles do you attribute to that? Because I feel like to me, that's a big part of it. When you look at that driving kick game that they haven't really been able to get going, and just how much he struggled, I do like your point that he is still such a winner. I mean, throughout the series, he makes great plays. He grabs that rebound. He makes a nice stop on defense. He grabs a steal, a block, whatever. But not having that 3-point shooting, I feel like has been a huge loss. And really, that creation, especially on a game like last night when really Tatum and Brown, they didn't have the best games necessarily, but they
Mhm.
were the only consistent sources of offense. So yeah, how much of the Celtics' offensive struggles overall do you attribute to White, or are there other factors that you're looking at?
I attribute a lot of it to White. I mean, you look at the, like you said, the drive and kick game is the Celtics bread and butter. I mean, even going back to when they had Horford and Porzingis, it was unstoppable. And Holiday too. You had guys that would just float out to the corner. In Holiday's case, typically float into the dunker spot, and you would just have these great opportunities to just drive it and dish it to someone else for an easy two, because you have Tatum and Brown drawing so much gravity, and they're just drawing so much attention. But with White, it's it's hard because the whole thing that really unlocks Tatum and Brown is to have these other guys around them making shots, because it forces the defense to, have to play single coverage. And in those situations, that's where Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum eat. But when you can have Edgecombe come over and help off and send two at a Jaylen Brown, it's going to lead to turnovers. It's really tough. And something I want to also circle back to is, you mentioned, wanting to see more of Baylor Shireman. This may be a hot take. In garbage time, I have loved Ron Harper Jr. I've loved what I've seen from him just in general this season, and I think, him getting rewarded with a standard deal was awesome. I think Joe Mazzulla in that game 6 or even game 5 should have just, when you're up in a series is the time where you can start, taking risks, taking gambles, trying out new things. And while it's weird to see a team veer away from a typical rotation when it comes to the postseason, give guys that have only played 30-ish games an opportunity to really go. Ron Harper Jr. is been a certified bucket in the minutes he's played. So I would have liked to see a little bit of him in game 6 coming in those minutes, because he's, again, another guy, 6'6" guard who can defend, he can dribble, pass, shoot. The Celtics, perfect type of role player. So I would have liked to see him, but I think a huge part of the Celtics' offensive struggles comes down to Derek White and just not being able to make shots. It also has affected Peyton Pritchard, because Pritchard's getting thrown to the fire a little earlier on in these situations. He's been pretty solid, I think, but yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah, I like that point about Harper a lot. I mean, even you saw that last night in Game 6 where they immediately sort of throw the white flag and they send in all these bench guys, and then they close the gap a little bit while
Yeah.
Philly still has their starters in. And Harper, especially, he immediately provided that energy boost. And I feel like, it is hard to play an 11 or 12 man rotation in the playoffs, and at some point that's likely not sustainable. But at the same time, the Celtics' biggest strength all season has been their depth and their unpredictability. And by turning away from guys like Harper, guys like Ugo Gonzalez, I feel like that's really hurt them. That's made them more predictable in some ways. And then you look at just how much they've struggled to defend Maxey. I feel like he would be huge on defense just to throw an extra body at Maxey and really try to make life challenging for him. I feel like Walsh has probably been their best guy in Maxey,
Hmm.
but at the
Yeah.
same time, he gives up a lot on offense, and Harper doesn't have those same deficiencies. So I would definitely like to see them pull the lever at some point. But I mean, now they're in Game 7, and
Exactly.
I don't know about you, but I don't think it's very likely that Missoula changes up his rotation
Yeah.
with the series on the line in Game 7.
Well, I even think, like, that's a great point, again, just about them, the depth kind of being this group's whole thing this whole season. What's Philadelphia's biggest weakness? They can't stay healthy, and they don't have enough guys to really roster a deep playoff rotation, and it's why they've leaned on Embiid, Maxey, Edgecombe, Paul George so much. That's a way to beat these guys. If you just keep throwing out fresh bodies, it's going to tire them out, because the Celtics themselves aren't going to be getting tired. And then, when it comes to the fourth quarter, you could have a stretch where Jason Tatum can play the final 10 minutes of the fourth, and you don't have to worry about, him being tired himself, because he gets a little more rest. So I agree with you when you said that, Joe Mazzulla is a absolute basketball genius. A basketball psycho is the best way to describe him. But he has, I wouldn't even say been out coached by Nick Nurse. I think he's out coached himself in this series, and kind of let the idea of what coaches are supposed to do in the playoffs, which is shrink your rotation, let your stars rock out. He's kind of let that idea get in his head. It seems like a bit much. One thing I'll give a ton of praise, though, the Celtics assistant coaching staff. I continue to love those guys. Like, no matter what's going on, if a shot's going up, they're the first three guys up off the bench, telling guys get back on defense, praising them, yelling at officials. Like, I hope Sam Cassell gets a head coaching gig this summer, because he deserves it.
Yeah, absolutely. When you brought up the Celtics assistant coaching staff, the first thing I thought of is, how does this man Sam Cassell not have a job? He's been
Yeah,
working in the league since he retired. I'm sure he can relate to players super well as a former
yeah.
player, and he just really seems to have a good grasp on everything. And I mean, when he was brought over in that second year of Missoula, I feel like that's when we really saw Missoula himself elevate as a head coach, and
Hmm.
obviously having that experience as a full year as a head coach before definitely helped him. But I think Cassell was a big part of that as well. But yeah, I mean, in general, I think the Celtics still have enough to close it out, but they're going to need some adjustments. I don't know if they're going to get much more production out of this big man rotation. It kind of is
Yeah.
what it is. I think you need White to knock down shots. That's going to be big. And then I think just not going to the isolation game as much. It hasn't worked. Paul George, to his credit, has been absolutely tremendous, like you said, on Jalen Brown and on Jason Tatum. And they're really making life difficult for Brown in particular, who's really
Yeah.
struggled with turnovers again. But yeah, I just think they need to stray away from that isolation ball a little bit. Go back to sort of their bread and butter, what's worked all season with their creative plays and their driving kick game. And I think they'll be in a decent spot. I am a little bit nervous after these last two games.
Hmm.
Obviously, it hasn't been great, but overall, I still think they can get it done. Where are you with that? Before we talk about a little bit more from the Sixers side.
I'm in a position, and this will kind of transition us to the Sixers side where they have big game players. I mean, VJ Edgecombe. I hate to say this as a Celtics supporter, but the dude is one of my five favorite players in the league, and he's only in his rookie season. He has a swagger, he has a presence, he has just that like me against the world mentality that you need in these closeout games. Tyrese Maxey is a top. I mean, the guard position is so low in the NBA. Probably a top 6 point guard in the entire NBA, which isn't like compared to other positions. I mean, that's very very high praise. Joel Embiid is Joel Embiid. Paul George, we've seen what he's kind of turning back the clock and using his skill set in a similar way to what LeBron was doing when the Lakers were healthy, where he's using that superstar skill set he has, but in a condensed role, and it's just absolutely phenomenal. But I'm very worried for the Celtics. As much as I could see Derek White going off, finally finding his shot back and having a 30-point game, or Tatum giving them a classic, Tatum triple-double performance, Pritchard coming off the bench and giving them a big night. Everything I've seen in these last two games, and even in game two of this series, like I don't know if the Celtics have the juice to get it done. And I tweeted something the other day like "Gap year Celtics" just as a joke, because it's like we're at that point where I guess we kind of just have to accept that may just be the way it goes with this team.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair to be concerned. And I mean, like I said earlier, the expectations were low for a reason. And
Yeah.
frankly, even if you lose as the two seed in the first round, it's not like you're a traditional two seed in any way. And, maybe that would be disappointing to some fans. But at the same time, heading into the season, the expectations were so low. I feel like this is still a really strong outcome for this team. But yeah, I mean, even if they get by the Sixers, I can't pick them to beat the Knicks, despite
Yeah.
picking them before the playoffs. I don't think they have the juice to get it done. But yeah, I think you brought up some really good points, especially with Maxey. He's been tremendous throughout this series, and then Embiid coming in, and especially these past two games, really looking excellent despite that appendix injury. I think that's a really tough combo,
Yeah.
especially given the Celtics. I mean, they struggle with fast guards despite having good perimeter defenders. I think Maxey's really exposed that weakness. And then the drop coverage with the big men certainly hasn't helped. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah. Just getting fried, man.
yeah, it's brutal. And then
Because the thing is, when you have the drop coverage and then you have Tatum, who you're also worried like he's moving a little more gingerly because he's the dude it hasn't even been a year since he tore his Achilles, so it gets so bad because you don't have the speed, and it gets a little better when Walsh is out there. But like we talked about earlier, that's a perfect opportunity for a guy like Ugo to be out there and just be running around like a maniac like he does. So yeah, it's been tough. It's been tough.
yeah, no, definitely. So I mean, like you said, I could definitely see the Sixers pulling this one off. I just want to give Maxey his flowers because, like you said, he's a legit top six level guard in the league, borderline top 10 guy
Who
in
would
the
you rank
league.
ahead of him?
Off the top of my head, I mean, we're classifying Shea obviously.
Yep.
Shea would be one. I would say Luca.
Hmm.
Are we just going like pure lead guards, or are we including guys like because Ant Edwards? I wouldn't call him a lead
Yeah,
guard, but
no,
I would
no,
say
just like point guard. So like
yeah.
Steph, Cade, probably.
I I
Yeah,
would say Steph and Cade, and then I would have him fifth. I think
yeah, yeah. I think
personally, I'm
that's
still a Steph guy. That might be a little bit of a hot
no,
take.
no, 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 no. That's no. You don't have to worry about that over here. I'm pro. I still think that the way the Warriors have handled this last. I mean, no one could have saw the Jimmy Butler injury happening, but I hope the Warriors. This is one of our talking points, I guess. But I just hope the Warriors do something crazy this summer. I want to see them like go get Kawhi or go get Giannis, or they need to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can still see it in these big moments with Steph. He hasn't lost it at all, and if you have a more competent roster around him, I think he's still a top 10 level guy in the league clearly and could be the best player on a championship team.
I
But yeah,
love
I agree.
Porzingis with him too, man. That was so much fun, that playing game.
That was Porzingis is such the he's perfect center for their system.
Hmm.
Obviously health is a big question, but if he can stay healthy, he's legitimately perfect for their system, and
Yeah.
I hope he can stay healthy.
Yeah.
I love the Kawhi shout too. I feel like that's a super realistic move that I can see happening. I don't know if they're going to go all in for Giannis trade. I think they'll certainly be in the mix, but I feel like Kawhi, that seems like the most obvious landing spot if he gets moved.
Yeah. And I think too, like I mean this is just like straight just theory, like not there's no substance to anything I'm about to say. I could see the NBA doing the Warriors a favor and they get a top four pick and they land a Caleb Wilson or I think Cam Boozer there would be phenomenal because you could truly run the Boozer and Draymond small ball front court. I think that would be like incredible to watch. But I could see the NBA doing them a little solid in the draft lottery. But if they don't, I would love to see Merez Johnson in a Warriors uniform. I think that would be a great pick for them.
Yeah, I think those are all phenomenal fits with them. I mean, you talk about a perfect player in their system, and I think that's Cam Boozer. And I
Yeah,
mean, you can't go wrong with any of the top four. And Merez Johnson, we've talked about it before. I think he's
yeah.
both of one of our favorite prospects. He's
Hmm.
tremendous, and I think he would be an awesome fit with them.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. He's just so switchable. He's honestly like a better version, or could become a better version of Isaiah Stewart.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect comp for him.
Yeah.
Personally, I think he's like a borderline top 10 prospect, and
Oh yeah.
consensus is like 20s. I was like, wait, what? I mean, have you seen this guy play? I thought
Yeah,
he was the
yeah.
best player on Michigan throughout the tournament.
Yeah, he cleans. He's the type of guy where he makes everyone else look better. I think a Mara looks 10 times better as a rim protector because you have Merez on the weak side. I think Yaxel is going to look like a way better shooter because Merez can catch the ball in the short roll and then kick it to someone in the corner, and there's just going to be more open shots. Like, you can't not be paying attention to him on either side of the court. So, yeah, he's
Yeah.
awesome.
No, absolutely. I think that's such a perfect way to put it. He just elevates everyone around him on really both ends of the court, and I still think he has a ton of potential as a guy who's still only 20 years old. I think
Hmm.
he's only going to continue to get better. But yeah, I think we can move ahead to our next playoff series, and that's going to be the Magic and Pistons right now. Magic are up 3-2. Game 6 tonight in Orlando. Obviously, a big surprise because the Magic came in as the 8th seed, and throughout the season, they looked like they were dead at points. I totally wrote them off heading into the playoffs, to be
Same.
honest with you. But they've really exceeded all expectations. And yeah, how are you feeling about this series? And then the other thing I think we really need to focus in on is Franz Wagner's injury because he's been crucial to them on both ends of the court. He's going to miss at least tonight's game. So yeah, where are you at with this series, and how much does Franz's injury sort of play into your prediction?
I think Detroit is dead in the water. I don't think they're going to win tonight without even with Franz not playing. But I mean long term this is the thing, right? Like Franz just continues to just be banged up, and I don't know if it's they're just not letting him get to full health and then throwing him into the fire or what it is, but he's a complete game changer. I understand there's concerns about how him and Paulo fit together, both being, ball dominant wings or forwards who can't really shoot the three ball effectively, at least at this point in their careers. But what they've been able to do in the playoffs has been incredible. I mean, against a Pistons team that lacks floor spacing, when you can have a 6'8" and a 6'10" wing or forward, drop back and just kind of sit around the rim as help for Wendell Carter Jr., who I think he deserves a ton of credit, but I also think the help defense that those two in Banchero and Wagner are providing deserves a little more praise than what it's getting. But just the Detroit Pistons, man, I didn't see this coming. I didn't see them losing in round one, but I never saw them as a true contender because I just felt like this was their chance to really make a push for it. And I understand they feel like they have a young core and the future's bright, but the NBA changes like that, and you had a chance to just go out, add all you needed to do was add another ball handler. All they needed to do is add another ball handler. I'm not even of the belief that they need to add a 25 point per game scorer to this team, because I think Cade Cunningham is that good, but they just completely neglected their needs, and it sunk their season.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you in terms of the Pistons trade deadline strategy. I thought that was really questionable at the time, and I never believed in them as a true contender heading into the playoffs. I picked the Hornets to upset them.
Yes, yes,
Obviously,
me too. Yes.
obviously that didn't work out. Because I think I was like the Magic, it would be like a 4 or 5 game series. I was completely out on the
Yeah.
Magic after that playing game against Philly. But I was
Wow.
like, I think the Hornets can beat them in 6 or 7 games, just because of how much offensive firepower they
Just the
have.
margins, yeah.
Yeah, I mean the concerns about the 3 point shooting and shot creation. I never bought into this idea that they've been good in the regular season, so that translates to the playoffs. The playoffs are just a whole nother monster, and that's
Hmm.
being proven in this series. I do think Detroit can get it done. I don't say that with full confidence, and by the time this comes out, you might be listening to this on Saturday morning or late Friday night, whatever, and be like, okay, the Magic 1-6, or what are you talking
Hmm.
about? But I do think the Franz injury does play a pretty sizable role to me. I think he's been their best defender on Cade, and then, like you said, off the ball, he's been super helpful to everything they do. And then just providing that extra creation next to Paulo is huge, and I feel like that's been their big advantage. When you look at matching up with the Pistons, they have Franz, Paulo, Bane. It's not perfect at all times, and I don't always love how their offense looks, but that's just more creation juice than the Pistons have, and I feel like that's going to be a pretty sizable loss. And I mean, you look at last game, Game 5, Cade really erupted with the Paulo or with the
Yeah.
Franz injury, and I feel like that's a trend we could continue to see. So without Franz, I don't think the Magic can do it. I wouldn't rule it out, but I'd have to lean Pistons. At the same time, I think either way, this Pistons team is going to require some significant changes
Yeah.
in the offseason. We're going to talk about this for a lot of other teams, but I feel like it's fair to do with the Pistons, whether they win or lose. I would pick either the Cavs or Raptors to beat them in the second round,
Yeah.
quite
Yeah.
frankly.
I think the Raptors is a night, like I don't think the Raptors are a good basketball team. I'll be honest with you. I am so far. I've been out, and I'm in Toronto, so I'm around Raptors fans constantly. I've been telling people this entire season, like, you're a good regular season team. Brandon Ingram can't be your best player. RJ Barrett can't be your third best player. Scotty Barnes, cool. He's an incredible player. One of the, if other than the alien, he is the best defender in the postseason, in my opinion. And then you have another guy in Colin Murray Boyles, who I'd argue has been a top 5 defender in the postseason himself. But they're not a good team, but they are a matchup nightmare for the Pistons. They just are. It's the same thing. They just have the same defensive infrastructure that Orlando has, and they have size and length. And yeah, I don't see Detroit going anywhere. I don't even know what they do too, because I mean, I see the Tyler Hero stuff. I don't hate that, but I mean, the teams aren't just giving away good ball handlers and guards in the offseason.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I was actually going to ask you that and then talk about the Magic's potential offseason outlook. I feel like we're fair to write these teams' obituaries as is. Obviously, one's going to lose in the first round, second round, whatever happens. I think either one of them would lose despite making it out of this, and both rosters are flawed.
Yeah.
With the Pistons, I'll throw a couple of ideas out there. I would look at your guy Trey Murphy the third. I think they have 6 or 7 tradable first round picks. They kept all their picks, sell the farm, go get Trey Murphy the third, similar to what the Magic did with Desmond Bain. I think that would be a significant needle mover for them. I don't know how much interest there would be on the Pelican side, but I'd look at him, maybe Michael Porter Jr., just a big win that can space
Yeah.
the floor, create for himself a little bit. And then in the offseason, I feel like there's a lot of good ball handlers that could be acquired for cheap, and just sort of that microwave scorer guard, just another guy who can handle the ball, create for himself and others. I'd be looking at Anthony Simons and Colin Sexton. So I
I
don't know
like
what you make of those 3 or 4 names, or if you have any other ideas in mind.
I like the Simons one a lot. I like the Trey Murphy the third one a lot. Another name I would throw out there for sure is Malik Monk. I think there's still a lot more gas in the tank for him. Like you said, you just need a microwave. You need someone who can handle the ball and take pressure off, or relieve some pressure when Cade's off the court. And they had that in Malik Beasley. I mean, he wasn't some exceptional break you down ball handler, but it was another dude who was just going to go out there and make shots. And they are desperately missing him. I honestly thought Dennis Jenkins could be that in the postseason, because I was loving what I was seeing from him in the regular season, but that just didn't be the case. I also like the idea of a Cam Spencer or a Ty Jerome. That would cost them a little more. Ty Jerome specifically would cost them a little more, but he's on an incredible team-friendly deal at $9 million. He averaged, 20 points per game in the handful of games he played this season, was shooting like 46% from three. So those are some guys too. But I really like the Anthony Simons show because I don't know what his market looks like this summer. And that could be, if you could get Anthony Simons for in that mid-level exception range, I don't see why not.
Yeah, absolutely. I was kind of thinking about that earlier this week, especially with the Pistons and then just some of these other free agents. I was like, well, what's Simon's market? But then I was like, hey, guess what? The Pistons could use a guy like
Yeah,
him. The
yeah,
Raptors could use a guy like him. The
yeah,
Rockets. I was like, okay, I think it might actually be a little bit more robust than meets the eye. But yeah, ultimately, I think you just need another ball handler and then another creator. Another guy I would look at is Kyrie Irving potentially.
Oh man, I love that. Yeah.
Because I feel like these, especially, I like your Grizzlies points with Spencer and Jerome, where they could be looking to rebuild. They draft a guard maybe, and one of those guys becomes expendable. Obviously, you don't know what the future holds with Ja, but sort of similarly, I think the Mavericks could be entering a new era, obviously with Cooper Flag. But I see Kyrie as a pretty clear trade candidate, especially if they get one of these lead guards in the draft. And I think the Pistons would be the perfect landing spot. I've heard a few Pistons fans float him around. But yeah, ultimately, it's kind of a rough season, or not really a rough season at all, because they won 60 plus games. I feel like it's trending towards a rough finish for the Pistons, but the
Mhm.
future is still super, super bright. And overall, it was a really strong season. So personally, I do feel like optimistic about their long term
For
outlook. But
sure.
when you win 60 games and potentially lose in the first round to what looked like a broken Magic team, that's a little concerning. Last guy I wanted to touch base on is Jalen Duren, who has really struggled this playoffs. I think unfortunately he's lost a lot of money. But my question with him is sort of how much do you feel comfortable paying him? He's a restricted free agent this summer, and could you potentially see him being pried away by another team despite his really poor playoffs?
I think the Pistons would be absolutely foolish to let Duran go, especially with his market taking a hit. I mean, even if the Lakers or the Bulls swoop in and they're like, "Okay, here you go, 40, we're going to give you 40 million." That's where I'd be like, "Okay, maybe we're going to start to draw the line." But at the same time, everything we saw in the regular season, this dude has all the potential in the world to be a top five center in the league. And when I look around the rest of the NBA, I don't really see very many young centers that I'm like, that's a guy I would give a bag to, or that's a guy that I could see being a center on my team for 10 plus seasons like I do with Jalen Duren. And I think people need to really factor in that he was a guy in the regular season where there's going to be more space that thrived off of the dump off game with Cade, and when it comes to the postseason and you're able to scheme more and you're seeing the same team every single night, on top of the mental battle with him now like allegedly going up against his ex girlfriend's new boyfriend and that being its own little thing. I just think he needs a little more like leeway. And when you look at people talk about, Cade struggling or the rest of this Pistons team struggling because there's not being spacing. That also really impacts Jalen Duren. So I'm still fully in on Jalen Duren. I think he had an incredible season. It's his. I mean, he was part of the playoff run last year, but this is his first real look where there's actual playoff pressure because last year with the Pistons, he just felt like they were happy to be there. So I'm not out on him. I would still give him $30 to $35 million a season, and I actually think this could really benefit the Pistons long term with maybe potentially being able to get him on a bit of a cheaper deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I'm out on him at all either. I had him as an All NBA guy this season. I thought he was terrific, one of the most improved players in the entire league. But yeah, I definitely agree with your point about the lack of spacing really affecting him. I feel like he gets talked about so much with Cade, and Cade's been able to overcome it. But I mean, it's just as vital for Duran because they can really pressure him inside. And I mean, especially with Asar, who's really terrific, but they can really sag off him. They have other guys you can sag off of. And that's really limited his inside game a lot. And I mean, I think he is the perfect center next to Cade for the future, and they should look to re-sign him. But at the same time, if he exceeds like 35 million a year, I don't know if I feel comfortable doing that. That's sort of just how I prioritize the center position,
I was
especially
just
when you have
about to say, yeah,
when
yeah.
you have other guys ready to fill that in with Isaiah Stewart and Paul Reed. It's like, do I
I
really want
love
to pay him
Paul Reed, by the
35?
way.
I know he's gonna be the best like third string center in the league.
Has to be. I mean, there's so many teams around the league that could use him as more than a third string center, but they're paying him, I think, $5 million to be a third stringer. So why wouldn't he be there? But I couldn't agree more. I don't prioritize the center position. I mean, if unless you have a game wrecker like Wemby, you all I really need you to do as a center is be Nick Claxton and block shots and dunk the basketball and catch lobs. That's all I really ever. If I was building a team from the ground up, that I'm filling out every position. Or actually, the way I would do it is I'd fill out the point guard, small forward, and then probably my other wing or my power forward spot, depending on how things look, and then center is last on that list, maybe with the off guard spot. I don't know. I just, like you said, I don't prioritize it, and I can't justify paying any center more than $35 million unless you're shooting 47% in the playoffs like that 7-foot whatever giant in San Antonio. So
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Nick Claxton is like my dream role player center. I mean, there's
yeah.
other guys around the league like that, but I mean, I don't want to go on a Nick Claxton tangent, but he is terrific, and I feel like one thing that's really underrated is just like that short roll passing that he has and just general playmaking. Um,
Yeah.
Talking about a guy I'd love for the Boston Celtics to trade for.
Oh,
Nick Claxton is at the very top of
yeah.
the list,
I
and
hope
I'm going
they
to talk
that
about that a lot more.
yeah, I could go on hours about Nick Claxton, but that's what I see. He's a little less athletic, but I see Henry Vasar a lot like that out of UNC. He's other than Merez, he's my number two big on my board, and a lot of places have him mocked in like the second round, but I think he has all the tools. He shot 47% from or 46% or so from three in college last year. He's really smart in the short roll. He sets good screens and he can be a threat vertically at the rim. So, yeah, not to go on a whole tangent about the center position in the NBA, but that's a guy that I would love to see the C's draft this year.
Oh yeah, Vasar's got to be at the top of my list for Celtics draft prospects, or near the top at the very
Mm-hmm.
least. Super interesting modern day center. I feel like he really checks all those boxes, especially with his floor spacing abilities and just how he reads the game. And I'm a Carolina guy, so yeah, I'm a big
Oh,
fan of him
okay.
as
There you
well.
go. Perfect. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think we can circle back to the Magic a little bit. I think we can both agree this roster still has flaws, especially with their 3-point shooting and playmaking. And man, just in general, I mean, game five was terrific because we had that awesome Paulo and Cade battle. I feel like both of them have really been terrific despite some of the poor roster construction around them. But in general, we can agree this team's still flawed. They need some extra playmaking and shooting. But with them making that big Desmond Bain trade, do you just see them sort of looking to make some moves around the edges? And then where do you see Jamal Mosley's future with this team? Just based on the fact that it was like, oh, they're almost 100% guaranteed to fire him. But if they pull off an 8-1 upset,
Yeah.
do you give it another shot?
I This is such an ugly roster. Like it's top to bottom. I just look at it and I'm like, what if this was 92, this team would be competing for a championship, but this is 2026 now, and I don't care even if Jamal Mosley pulls off this upset, because in my opinion he hasn't like done anything where I'm like, wow, Jamal Mosley made this crazy adjustment and that's why they're winning the series. Like, they are still playing that really ugly, brutal brand of basketball. It's just the Pistons have been worse, and the two teams, it's just like they're both, the oil and water separate. These teams are both water, and they're just one, like, it's just one thing. So I still think he can't be the coach next year. I think he needs an offensive mind. Especially with Billy Donovan on the market. He has the Florida roots. I would see him as the guy. But as an overall roster construction standpoint, I don't think we're at the point where we have to discuss Paulo or Franz, but next offseason you're going to have to, because Anthony Black is going to need a payday, and he's a game changer. Whether you stick with Paulo or Franz, he's a guy that's like perfect, especially with his improved shooting, like a perfect complementary piece next to those guys. I'd potentially look at the Jalen Suggs market. I mean, we talked about Kyrie Irving. If you can get a shot maker at the guard position and it costs you Jalen Suggs, I'd say so be it. But I also don't. The Orlando Magic are an organization, and they've always been this way, where they wait too long to make major changes, and it typically, bites them in the butt. So I don't see them doing anything crazy. I think maybe they're adding like a shot maker, like a Simons or a Colin Sexton in free agency. They'll probably draft someone that they shouldn't be drafting at the range they're picking in, and then Yeah, I don't know. I just can't. I have a good friend who runs an Orlando Magic page. He's a diehard Magic fan, and I feel for him every day because they always have these great young upcoming rosters, and it just never goes anywhere. So I don't have an answer other than I don't think Jamal Mosley should be back next year.
Yeah, I agree. I think with Mosley, the biggest thing that I've seen that concerns me is just the lack of creativity with his offensive schemes. The roster doesn't help. Don't get me wrong, but
Yeah,
I agree. You just need more of an offensive mind in there, like the Donovan shout. I think you just got to give it one more chance with a true offensive mind, and then evaluate the roster from there. Make some moves around the edges, get another shot maker, playmaker, just any sort of shooting outside of Bane would be huge.
yeah,
God, where would they be without Desmond Bane? I think a lot of people are like, "Hey, this Bane trade was terrible." It's like, dude, I don't even think they'd be in the playoffs or even close
yeah.
without Bane. To be honest with you, and then yeah, I agree. You're probably at some point gonna have to pick between Anthony Black and Jalen Suggs, and I would explore trading Suggs, despite how awesome he's been in the playoffs and how disruptive of a defender he is. I think some of the health concerns are relevant, and just in terms of play style, I don't think the quartet of Suggs, Anthony Black, Paulo, and Franz is totally sustainable long term. So at some point, I feel like they're gonna at least have to trade one of them.
Yeah, I would also, if this was a possibility, I would explore the Giannis avenue. It started the first time I ever heard it was Sam Vecini throwing out that idea on game theory that this is something they should do, and then I saw a report, I think from Mike Scotto, like a week ago or a couple days ago, that said like there was actually some realness to that, almost like kind of coming and becoming something. I think you explore that whether it costs you or I wouldn't trade Franz in a Giannis deal because I feel like Giannis and Paulo is very redundant and just wouldn't work. But I don't know. I think you could you could totally have with both the Rockets and Magic are two teams that I think should involve themselves in Giannis conversations. Those are both teams with the size and the length that they have that Giannis could comfortably play the five. So that would be my only like big thing to look out for the Magic. But other than that, I don't have much to say about this team. They just yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think they're definitely a stealth Giannis team. And when you're looking at what the Bucks might value, if they just value getting that blue chip young prospect back in a Giannis trade, I feel like potentially Paulo or potentially Evan Mobley would be the two
Yeah, the
guys that could
Cavs
deliver.
too. Good point.
We're gonna talk about the Cavs in a second because boy, if they lose this series to Toronto, are there gonna be some major changes in Cleveland. But
Yeah.
I feel like if they really value that blue chip guy, I think it could make sense. And then you get Giannis, he's really the ultimate ceiling raiser, and you just say we're gonna go all in on winning it. See how it works. I think you'd still need to address the floor spacing in some ways, but
Hmm.
Giannis, I mean, he's a top five level guy in the league. You hope Paulo can get there. I'm still pretty high on him overall as a
Yeah.
prospect or as a player, but I think he might cap out at that like top 10, 15 range. And
Yeah.
Giannis is Giannis, so I definitely agree that would be worth exploring as a big move. I think we can transition now to talk about some Cavs Raptors, which has just been a total bizarro series in my eyes. Right now the Cavs are up, or yeah, Cavs are up 3-2.
Hmm.
Game six tonight in Toronto. I want to get the Raptors perspective because I know you live in Toronto and you got a ton of Raptors fans
Yeah.
around you. But yeah, overall takes on this series, and then what's the state of Raptors Nation like right now?
Well, I'll tell you this right now. They hate Brandon Ingram. Like the Brandon Ingram love at the beginning of the season when he was putting up 25 points per game and they were winning and they went on that 10-0 win streak or whatever it was and everything looked amazing and they were the 3 seed. The love was unbelievable. Everyone loved this guy. Glorilla was courtside. People were loving her. Her streams were high in Toronto. And then it slowly started to go down. I think he ended the season averaging just above 21 points per game. And then the postseason comes and he is just the biggest thing was leaving the game with like ankle inflammation or whatever or heel inflammation. That has people heated here. And we're a very nice country. Canada is supposed to be this nice place, but people are not happy with Brandon Ingram. They felt like he kind of quit on the team. He just missed it, or he had a bad turnover, said his ankle or his heel was bothering him, and kind of just checked out and didn't come back. So there's a lot of hatred towards Brandon Ingram right now, but I've went up to bat for him, and that's not just because of the Pelicans connection, but I think the Raptors front office set Brandon Ingram up for failure when they traded for him because they tried to sell the fan base on the idea that he could be a number one option, and we both know he just can't. There's the Pelicans were a great example of it, but it's also just that skill set. It's very similar to DeMar DeRozan in his prime. You can't win with that as your number one. But other than that, this series has been interesting. I mean, you have that game 4 where no one makes a shot. I think the Raptors won not they had 93 points on 97 shots. I mean, like it was just an eyesore of a series. So I don't know. It's the vibes are weird here because you have a mixed reaction. You have people feeling like it'd be a missed opportunity because they could be playing the Magic in round 2, and that could be a potential chance to go to the conference finals. But you also have people who have been just pushing the agenda like this is year one of this. This is it's not make or break for us like it is for Cleveland. So yeah, I don't know. I also just think the way they approached their rebuild was a joke. You made this big stink about approaching a rebuild and being in a rebuilding year, and then you extend Jakob Poeltl, you trade for Brandon Ingram, you go on a win streak mid-season that then drops your odds for a top 5 pick from like you were going to be in the top 5 to now you're picking 9th or 8th or whatever. And Colin Murray-Boyles has been awesome, but I mean, you could have had Dylan Harper on this team. Like that's where they were at. So I don't know. The Raptors are in a weird spot, but yeah, what are your takeaways from this?
Yeah, for sure. I think the first thing that comes to mind is if you had told me that Brandon Ingram has performed this poorly in the playoffs, I would have said, okay, the Raptors got swept. They
Yeah.
exceeded my expectations this season. I think they exceeded your expectations. I remember having you on the pod to do the Raptors season preview. We were both pretty low on them. We didn't like the roster construction. Still don't like the roster construction, to be clear. But they have exceeded expectations this season, and I guess their kind of weird plan has worked to a degree. And I'm a little bit shocked that they're in this series, to be honest with you. I thought it would be closer to a 5 game series, and then you throw in the Ingram factor, and I was like, they got to be done. But Scotty Barnes has been terrific as that first option kind of scorer. RJ Barrett's having a really good series. Definitely surprised me. And just in general, I've been surprised by how they have been able to overcome sort of their lack of offensive juice. And there has been a lot of low scoring ugly games, especially that game 4, but they've managed really well, and I think they've set the tone with their physicality on defense. That's probably been my biggest thing that I've been impressed with the Raptors, and Darko Rajakovic deserves a ton of credit for the coaching job that he's done. Even when they were down 2 hours, like I feel like Darko's kind of pushing the right buttons. Colin Murray-Boyles, like you mentioned, he's been tremendous. I think he's made life really challenging. When they go to that small ball look with him at the 5, I feel like that's really their best threat against the Cavs. And I think on the Cavs side of things, my biggest takeaway, and just heading into the playoffs, I thought Evan Mobley was a real swing factor. But to me, if you look at every game, it's like, okay, Evan Mobley plays well, the Cavs win. Evan Mobley doesn't play well, the Cavs lose. And I feel like in the 2 games that they have lost, and even in that game 5, they did a really nice job just making Evan Mobley uncomfortable. They have that physicality advantage, and Mobley is a guy that does struggle to be assertive at times, and I feel like that's been a big problem for the Cavs, along with James Harden's production after the first 2 games sort of waning.
Yeah, I agree. I think Evan Mobley. I thought that's where I thought the Raptors, or this is why I thought the Raptors were going to lose this series because you have Mobley and Allen, and you're going up against Jakob Poeltl, who, I mean, he has knees like he's been working construction for like 30 plus years at this point in his basketball playing career. And I was like, well, Colin Murray-Boyles is a physical threat, and Mobley is a much skinnier big man presence at 7 foot. I thought it wasn't. I didn't think it was going to play a factor like it is. My question to you is, as someone on the outside looking in from the Raptors, what would you do this summer? Like, where can you even make changes? Because they have their own first round picks, but they don't have any, other teams picks or anything like that. Their picks going to probably be in the 20s this year. You have Emmanuel quickly locked up. You have RJ Barrett. You have Brandon Ingram. You have Jakob Poeltl. Like, where Grady Dick, complete miss of a draft pick. Like, where do you go?
Yeah, that's a really, really tough question, to be honest. I feel like they're in one of the more difficult positions. I don't. know if this is like a long-term plan. I know it's not
Yeah.
something that's long-term sustainable to have RJ, Scotty, and Brandon Ingram be your three best players on a championship team. With that being said, the best way to optimize it, I think, would be upgrading that point guard spot. I know Quickly hasn't played in this series, and I remember some Raptors fans early on, they're like, we don't have Emmanuel Quickly. I'm not a big believer in him as a high leverage guy, just based off the defense. I think he's a fantastic spark plug. I mean, if he's playing that Bones Highland role where it's like, hey, if we get 20 good minutes out of Bones and he lights it up, that's great. But we're not counting on him to play 25 minutes a game, even. I think that's ideal in that spark plug sort of role. But if he's your starting point guard, your team's probably not great, to put it lightly. So I'd
Yeah.
look to upgrade that point guard position, and then just get another center in there. I don't think it needs to be like a starter, but just get another rim runner, defender. The total contract genuinely looks like the worst deal in the entire league. Baffling from the start, but yeah, I'd look at really upgrading those two positions. I don't have a specific name in mind.
Right.
I know a lot of Raptors fans are really kicking themselves for uh, not getting Ayo Dosunmu at the trade deadline, and I can see
Yeah.
why, especially when you do have your first round picks, and it didn't take a first round pick to get him. But yeah, upgrading those two areas I think would be huge, and then I think that would just be a huge boon to their overall depth, which is another concern that I have with this team.
Yeah, well, like you just said about Emmanuel quickly, that guy is getting paid $32.5 million these next 3 seasons. And I don't know a team in the league that would touch that contract. Not even just because of the stuff you were saying, because I 100% agree with all that, but he also just can't stay healthy. I think this just goes back. You look at the way that, and I was a big Masai Ujiri guy, and he's now gone from the Raptors organization. But if you look back at how he handled the entire, blowing up of the roster to build something new around Scotty Barnes, it was horrible. I mean, they traded OG Anunoby, who the deadline prior allegedly had the Pelicans and the Grizzlies in a bidding war that was going to exceed four first round picks, young players, and then pick swaps. And they decided, you know what, we're going to stick with this group and give them a chance to really just do something, which was make the plan and get eliminated and then draft Grady Dick. And then you go and you trade OG Anunoby away for Emmanuel Quickly and RJ Barrett and get no draft capital. Like, and then even the Pascal Siakam trade to Indiana, I love that for the Pacers, but 3 first round picks and Bruce Brown was what you got for your franchise player at the time. Like, I don't know what the Raptors could possibly do. I thought, the only way they could maybe offload some of this money was to do the Domantas Sabonis thing. And a lot of people, I was very pro of that for the Raptors. A lot of people were like, well, Sabonis ended up missing the rest of the season. That's cool. It's better than having to have the long term commitment that is paying a guy like Emmanuel Quickly $30+ million. So I think this was so funny about the Eastern Conference because I've been an advocate for it being like a fun, gritty conference all season, but you look through 1 to 8 in the conference, and there are, I would say, I mean, the Cavs, the Pistons. I won't put Detroit in there. The Cavs, the Magic, the Raptors. Atlanta's got a lot of flexibility, so I guess you can't put them in there. But even the Sixers, those are 4 teams that really can't do much this summer. Like they can, and it would be like it would have to be big moves, but they're all in pretty rough shape. I mean, even if Philly gets through, you have Joel Embiid at 57 million. You have Tyrese Maxey at 40+ million. You have Paul George at 54 million. You can't really do anything with that. So, yeah, I mean, maybe the Raptors try to go get Joel Embiid. Maybe that's their big move, but yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. It is kind of funny to just look down the entire East and you can really point out significant roster flaws. With all due respect to the Knicks, who are probably favorites to come out of the East right now, I still don't think they really stand a significant chance against the Thunder or Spurs.
Hmm.
And like you said, a lot of these teams they're in between a rock and a hard place when you look at the offseason and the potential moves they have. I do kind of agree with you about Sabonis. It's like why not? Like, what do we have to lose? You can get off of one of those really bad contracts, presumably. The other guy I've always floated around for them too is John Morant. It's one of the few
Yes.
good teams that I can sell myself on taking a risk on John Morant, especially because you're getting under that quickly contract or Podol, one of them at least. So I feel like you have to target one of those flawed stars, whether it be playstyle reasons like Sabonis or availability concerns like a Ja or even a Joel Embiid if the Sixers want to
Well,
potentially
because
move off of him. So I feel like you got to sort of take a risk if you want to add one of those stars. Obviously not ideal, but who knows? It could work out for the Raptors, and it's probably better than the alternative of keeping quickly and Podol.
yeah, the thing people always would rebuttal with the Ja Morant thing was like, well, Ja can't shoot, and that's a fair argument. This Raptors team already struggles with that enough, but at the same time, he has a Darko connection, and if Ja Morant becomes Ja Morant again, we don't have to. No one has to worry about if the dude can shoot because he's going to average 27 points per game and be a top eight, top seven point guard in the entire NBA. Like I don't think people remember that Ja Morant finished top 10 in MVP voting at 22 years old. Like this guy is if I'm the Sacramento Kings, if I'm the Brooklyn Nets, if I'm any team that just has nothing going for them, even the Houston Rockets, I understand they need shooting too. Miami, like you, Phoenix, all these teams should be called. Even Minnesota. If Minnesota wants to go out and get a no, you don't like that.
No, no, continue.
If Minnesota like wants to just do something crazy, like they're just some team needs to pull the trigger. I mean, I hope it's not the Pelicans because that's a rumor and that just sounds horrible to me because not even injury concerns. It's just you have a franchise point guard in Jeremiah Fears. Like, don't do that. But I just think that the whole discourse around John Moran is very flawed, and I think people overthink the inability to shoot the three ball because I mean I'll check it. You can go ahead and chat now because I've been yapping for a minute there about John Moran, but I'll check his 3 point percentages over his career because I could be mistaken, but I think there was a couple years he shot it pretty well.
Yeah, I think the bigger concern with me beyond the availability concerns with Jaw is the decline in rim numbers. Because that's what
Fair.
his bread and butter should be. And every single year since I believe year two or three, he's just gone steadily downhill with those rim numbers. But with certain teams, I agree. I don't personally think we'll talk about the Timberwolves in a second. I don't think that's a risk they should take, or even the Rockets, teams that are closer to contending. I just wouldn't. But if you're a team that's sort of stuck in between, like the Raptors, especially you have some of these bad contracts, or if you're one of those teams, I agree. The Nets are or not Suns, sorry, Nets or Kins at the very bottom. Yeah, what the heck? Take a risk on him. Suns, I could potentially see it if you want more of a true point guard next to Booker. So I do think his market could be a little bit more robust than some are anticipating, and I certainly wouldn't rule out the possibility of him rehabilitating his career. But yeah, I'd like to move on to the Cavs side a little bit. If they do happen to lose this series, which I'm personally picking the Cavs to close it out tonight. I don't know about you, but if things go down in flames, let's just play this hypothetical game. What do you think their offseason looks like?
Well, this is the thing, right? Like we talked about the market for guys like Anthony Simons or Colin Sexton, and then you brought up a great point. There is going to be a fair amount of teams that kind of need that shot creating type of player. Where do you go with James Harden is my question because I don't. If you lose this series, I don't really see a reason to bring him back. But then even I read some stuff like if they don't go through if they don't go on a run like Donovan Mitchell's out the door. So I'm lost with the Cavaliers. I think if you could get Donovan Mitchell and James Harden to want to return next season, I think the obvious move is you trade away Jared Allen. But even then, I don't know if I trust Evan Mobley. I mean, we've seen this series. He gets bullied a lot by bigger centers or just like bigger, like more physically imposing dudes. So I don't know if he can be a legit center in the NBA. I don't know where I would go if I was the Cleveland Cavaliers. I'll tell you this right now, I would not fire Kenny Atkinson. I think none of this is his fault. But yeah, I mean, they have tradable contracts. Max Strus, 17 million. I know that one for sure. But yeah, I don't know where they go from here.
I think they really tipped their cap at the trade deadline by trading Garland for Harden. That they're sort of going all in on this condensed window. And I think they just sort of double down on that. Potentially trade in Mitchell if things get bad enough, but I don't see that happening personally. I still think they can go to the conference finals, and maybe all of this is overblown, but
Hmm.
games 3 and 4 were really alarming for the Cavs, and I think that needs to be accounted for, especially with their playoff track record. I don't think there's a move with Harden. I think it would just be okay. We're gonna probably trade Evan Mobley at this point. Evan Mobley for Giannis is something I would just
Right.
if you're going in on that condensed window, that's like the best possible
Hmm.
move you can make. I also think the LeBron James reunion potential is very real. Depends on how this Lakers run plays out and stuff, but I do think his time there has sort of come to an end. So I think it would just be like going all in on this super old roster and seeing if you could win a championship in the next few years. Probably not the best choice in the world, but with how things have played out these past few playoffs, I can definitely understand it, and the East is still super wide open. They're in a difficult spot, and I feel like the only choice they have is to sort of double down on a condensed window.
Yeah, this Cavs team, I agree with that. I guess they would just have to go for it, and especially because their front office, the life cycle of an NBA front office. I mean, as Celtics fans, we're spoiled because I think Brad Stevens will be around for the next 30 years. But yeah, please. But that's why I laugh when I see like Dallas wants him. I'm like, that. Like, does Dallas not realize that as much as they have Cooper Flag, there's very few. Anyway, I don't want to get into all that, but I with the like as a GM, you kind of just have to go for it. So I could see the LeBron James thing being real in the sense that you could see a Jared Allen for LeBron sign and trade where then the Lakers get their answer at the 5. But yeah, I don't I I wonder with Donovan Mitchell what he really wants to do. I very much wonder where he goes from here. And I wouldn't fully rule out if I was the Cavaliers of just going into a rebuild. Like I know I said the opposite of that with the front office thing, but if they front office could convince ownership to give them another chance and let them retool this thing, you could still keep Kenny Atkinson because he has a track record of developing talent. Maybe you sell Jared Allen, you sell Donovan Mitchell, you just don't bring back James Harden, and then you just rebuild something around Evan Mobley. I think that could be a fun opportunity, but yeah, I think the most realistic outcome is they just go all in on this window and try to make it work.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind the idea of a rebuild, especially in Mobley's timeline. I think he still has tons of upside. He's just not totally there offensively still. Let me look at their pick situation.
It's
Yeah,
not
my big
great.
concern is they don't own their first round pick until 2030. That's where they've really handcuffed themselves here. Because if you go into a rebuild without owning your pick, that's sort of a death sentence. So I
Yeah,
feel like unfortunately the only option they'll have is
just doubling
potentially
down
going doubling down. But yeah, who knows? I could still see them potentially even coming out of the East, especially with how the Celtics have
for
looked.
sure.
But I think it's a conversation worth having with how wonky they've been in the playoffs this year and really throughout the past few years. But let's move on. Let's talk some Lakers and Rockets. Lakers go up 3-0, and then they lose the last 2 games to the Rockets. Game 6 tonight. Do you think the Rockets have an improbable 0-3 comeback in them, or do you think the Lakers are just going to close this one out?
I think if the Rockets win tonight, I think they win the series, but I don't see a world where I can't bring myself to actually thinking Houston's going to win tonight. I just think, I mean, you look at the way the Lakers executed in game 5. It just wasn't the game they've played all series. They didn't shoot the three ball. They had 6 3-point attempts at the half. And credit to Houston, they did an incredible job. They've done a much better job as the series went on of just chasing guys off the perimeter. And, Josh Okogie especially has been really good at just, making things uncomfortable for Luke Kennard and Rui Hachimura. But at the same time, I just don't see an outcome where LeBron's going to have the poor game he had. Luke Kennard is going to be as passive as he was. And I just don't know how sustainable it is for Houston. I think they got so many other issues, and I do believe J.J. Redick's going to come to this game with a proper game plan and once again out-coach Ime Udoka.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I thought they were going to close it out in Game 5. Feel decently confident about them doing it in Game 6. I definitely agree with your point that the Rockets' defense has definitely kicked it up a notch, which is like, hey, finally, guess what? You're playing against an offense that's not all that great with some of the injuries they have, and your defense has been your calling card all year. Who would have known? But in general, I still think the Lakers can get it done, especially with Reeves. He returned in Game 5. He didn't look totally himself. Had some big shots, but also struggled efficiency wise. I think he was sort of shaking off some rust. I think it's going to be a big game for Reeves. What we've seen from the Rockets, especially in the clutch, has been really, really concerning to say the least.
Yeah.
Throughout this
Yeah,
series and
especially
throughout the
without
season.
Kevin Durant, it's ugly.
I mean, at some point, that's how I feel. The Lakers, all they have to do is keep this one close, and they can win despite sort of the athleticism advantage Houston has. If the Lakers can keep this close, I trust them to execute in the clutch a lot more. And frankly, I think there's a scenario where they blow them out, just considering the Rockets' awful offense in some ways, especially without Durant. The spacing's been awful. So yeah, I trust the Lakers to close this one out for sure.
Yeah, no, I think these last two games may have given Ime Udoka another fighting chance at coaching this team next year. But the Rockets just aren't a serious contender. I've felt that way since I think they felt that way at the trade deadline when they decided against trading. I mean, you're telling me they couldn't have been the team to go get Kobe White for at the time it was 3 seconds and then became 2 seconds because of like his injury or whatever. You're telling me they couldn't have done that. So I don't know. I don't. I was a huge Alperen Şengün guy when he came out of the draft. I actually have his jersey is in my closet. Like prior to even having the correct characters of like his accents on it. Like it's just his name, just like verbatim, like you would type it out on a computer. And I love the guy, and now I just can't stand him. I can't watch him play. He just complains. He sucks defensively, and he's just not. I don't know what more to say. And Jabari Smith Jr. too, man. Like you made me look like a fool. I was on NBA Twitter, on Instagram, talking about how you were the steal of the draft at pick 3, and you were gonna shock the world because you were this dominant player in college, and you can't even put the ball in the deck. And then I'll give Amen Thompson some credit. He's been awesome in this series. At least I feel that way. But this Rockets team, I don't know how I feel about their future at all.
It's crazy how much can change in the course of a year. Because
Yes.
when you look at it last year, they were the 2 seed, whatever. They lose in the first round to 7 games against the Warriors, I believe. And it's like Şengün, or he didn't have the best series, whatever. I couldn't agree more with the Şengün stuff. He's been a frustrating watch. I've watched a lot of Rockets games because they're just such an interesting team to me, and obviously watching them in the playoffs. But throughout the regular season, they were one of my most watched teams. And the Şengün experience has been so brutal this season. After a really strong start where it was like, oh, is he going to add a 3 ball? That would open up so much. Nope.
Yep.
Complete non-threat. And then the defense has been bad. The complaining, I think he's probably, maybe other than like Luka, he's like the guy who complains the most to the refs.
Yeah,
Him and
he's
Tyler
like
Lee,
Luka Jokic tier complainer. It's bad.
it's terrible. And he flops around. It hasn't been a great experience at all. I think at some point I mentioned this last week on the podcast when they were down 3-0 at the time, I believe. I was like, I think you're going to have to pick between him and Thompson. And obviously you want to keep Thompson, but what's Şengün's trade value look like? Just considering how difficult it is to build a true contender around that style of player. So I'm like, maybe you trade Thompson and you get a true like superstar guy, and then you accelerate this timeline. But it's kind of rough. I think this year is sort of exposed like the front office did an overall really good job of drafting players. They drafted a ton of talent, but they didn't draft players that fit super well together. And I think this year has really highlighted that.
Yeah, I think the other thing too with this is when Ime was with the Celtics, he was the exact same coach. Like a lot of people act like there was this drastic change. I don't feel that way. I think he was the same type of coach. He was extremely hard on his players. He kind of just had this attitude towards Tatum and Brown that he like hated them, and he does the same thing with the Rockets. The difference was Tatum and Brown would respond to it in a different way. They would go out and you could tell they would just be like, all right, we're going to go prove coach wrong. With the Rockets, it's like there's this weird disconnect between the coaching staff and the players where it's like these players don't like playing for the coaches, and then the coaches don't like coaching the players. And when you look at Ime, I mean, you go back to that, it was 2022 against the Warriors, correct? I got that right? Yeah. So you look at that series, they're playing drop coverage against Steph Curry. And I think Jaylen Brown mentioned that again recently. Like, that just comes down to just his coaching. You go up 2-0 in that series. I thought I was ready to plan the parade. I was looking at flights to Boston with my family. I was ready to go. and they choked it. They lost 4 straight, and a lot of that is because Ime just got out coached. And I've made the case that Ime is similar to Darvin Ham in the way that I think he's the type of coach in the right situation that can develop, and Jamal Mosley too, where they can develop a culture. They're going to build you a defensive identity, but that ceiling is first round exit every year because they just can't hit the next step as an offensive mind. And that's what made him such an elite assistant for so long. And I just don't know where Houston goes from here. Like you said, they drafted a bunch of dudes who fit Ime's physical, rough, tough style other than Şengün. Sorry. But they don't have shooters. They don't have you can't, and we've seen it too. I don't think Kevin Durant deserves the criticism he gets because you've seen throughout his entire career his personality as a person isn't like a leader type. He's an exceptional basketball player. He can be your best player on a championship team, but he can't lead you to a championship. So I don't like the Rockets. I don't like their future, and they're in a good enough spot where, like you said, they could go and put a package together and trade for a superstar, but at the same time, I just don't know where they go from here.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially with those Ime points. He is just so stubborn. He's genuinely one of the most stubborn coaches in the league, and I think that's really hurting the Rockets here. I get it. Reed Shepherd hasn't been good on defense, but the inability early on in the series to unleash him has been a problem, and they need his offensive skill set a lot. And yeah, I agree with the points about openly criticizing players. That works with more established players. That doesn't work so well with this type of team, and the results are clear. I think they do need to move on. He is a great culture builder. He instills this great defensive infrastructure, but at the same time, he does have a clear ceiling, and his offensive schemes are not creative. Playing iso ball with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown works pretty well, but when you're doing it with this team, especially without Kevin Durant, it just doesn't work, and we've seen it throughout this season. I think it's pretty clear. Let's move on to some other teams who have been eliminated and check in on the other series. Probably not going to spend as much time on these teams.
Yeah.
But I still think there's a lot to talk about. I think we got to start with the Wolves closing out the Nuggets last night in 6 games. We got Jaden McDaniels.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
But yeah, I mean, I couldn't be more impressed with how the Wolves were able to close out the Nuggets. We'll talk about their future in a second. But man, when you look at Dante DiVincenzo going down with an injury, devastating Achilles injury, just heartbreaking stuff, and then you look at Anthony Edwards going down with his knee injury, and then they still win that game 4
without Io.
At all. And then I was just gonna say game 6, Io's ruled out. Io was the hero in game 4. He scored 43 points, and they find a way to win. Before we talk about the Nuggets side, do you have anything to say about just this sort of tenacity that we've seen from the Timberwolves this past couple of weeks?
It's Chris Finch. I think Chris Finch, I put something out on Twitter today. I think Chris Finch is in the same conversation as your Spoelstras, your Mazzulas. Like, I just think he's so good at motivating guys. And I understand for a while, he even made a questionable remark about Terrence Shannon Jr. where he said something along the lines of yeah, I didn't know that I just had to put the ball in his hands and let him do this stuff. I think it was something like that. But at the end of the day, he hasn't done an excellent job developing guys. Leonard Miller has now gone to Chicago, and he's looked pretty good since going over there. It's also you can't do both. You can't develop and win at a high level. You can't do both at a high level. And the Timberwolves are a team that is trying to win. That organization wants to win. They have Anthony Edwards, a bona fide top 10 guy in the league. They've done just such a good job of just finding ways to win, and I loved seeing Jalen Clark in that game. I was waiting for it all series. Jalen Clark is one of my favorite niche players in the league because I think he won multiple Defensive Player of the Years in college. He is an absolute menace to society defensively. He gets in Nikola Jokic's face. He has Jokic frustrated. I was not an anti-Jokic guy until this series, but I just loved seeing the way they bullied him and they made him uncomfortable. I think Rudy Gobert deserves so much praise because, my goodness, I've never seen someone do what he did against Jokic in that series, even on the perimeter. I mean, 2 years ago, we were making fun of this guy for being on the perimeter, having to guard Luka and getting a game winner dropped on his head. And now he's locking up, in my opinion at least, going into the playoffs, was the best player in the world, Nikola Jokic. Then you have Jaden McDaniels making ridiculous shots. You have Julius Randle playmaking and kind of silencing his playoff doubters. Mike Conley was phenomenal down the stretch. whether the Celtics advance or not, I am fully rooting for the Timberwolves to go on a deep run again because there's just something about this group that is just so tough. And I didn't even really get to talk about Terrence Shannon Jr., but he rocks. He's awesome. So, yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I'm happy you started with Finch. I'm not sure how much you're aware of this in the Timberwolves fan base, but Finch was criticized heavily throughout the season. I thought it was a disappointing year for the Timberwolves. I thought some of those criticisms were valid, and I was kind of thinking, hey, if they flame out in the first round, just based off the history of coaches, what's going to happen? But I think he's proven without a shadow of a doubt that he's not only the right man for this job, but he's truly one of the best playoff coaches. Every single year, the Timberwolves, for the last 3 years, have been heavy underdogs and they pulled off a first round upset each and every time, this time being the most improbable first round upset. And every time the game plan has been so dialed, and Chris Finch deserves so much fucking credit for that, man. He has been incredible with the game plan, attacking Jokic relentlessly, attacking all their matchups, putting pressure on the rim, making life difficult for Jamal Murray, making life difficult for Nikola Jokic. And you can see that this team really responds to his style of coaching. He knows how to sort of tailor his coaching to other players, sort of like we're talking about how Ime struggles with that. That's something Finch excels at. I thought his quote about Terrence Shannon before the game was really interesting, where he's like, it was something about defensive struggles. They were talking about that. He said it held him back from playing in Game 5. He's like, he's got to clean that up. He knows what he needs to do. Terrence Shannon responds to that challenge with an incredible 24-point performance. And yeah, I mean, Jaden McDaniels, genuinely my favorite series from any player ever. Jaden McDaniels has always been one of my guys. Calling out the entire Nuggets defense, responding the game after with a very loud 20-point performance, and then putting them away with a 32-point performance. The way he attacked the rim relentlessly was amazing. His defense on Jamal Murray was tremendous. The playmaking has really developed. The shot making at all levels has been incredible. I know the 3-point shot wasn't totally there this season or this series, but he was really tremendous. Rudy Gobert against Jokic, probably the best defensive performance I've ever seen in a series. And yeah, I mean, I've never been like prouder of a team, genuinely, just based off all the adversity they faced with injuries and how they were able to still put away the Nuggets. It was incredibly impressive. And yeah, it was a pleasure to watch, and I think they're going to give the Spurs everything they have. It's going to be an uphill battle, but they've proven that you can't count them out.
Mm-hmm. I have a question to ask you. It's not really related to it is to the outcome of the postseason for Minnesota, but what do you make of like how much of an impact? I believe it's Matt Lloyd, right? Is it Matt Lloyd? Is that the guy's
The
name?
assistant GM?
Yeah,
Or the GM, sorry.
yeah,
He's Tim Conley's right-hand man. Yeah.
yeah. So he's rumored to go to Chicago, and the thing I keep seeing is like if he goes, Micah Nora is going to go with him. How much of an impact is losing Micah Nora going to have on this team?
That's a good question. I think pretty big, actually. Micah Nori and Chris Finch, it has sort of been a tandem coaching job. The players always praise him. He's really been credited for a lot of the offensive schemes in particular. He, at sort of the beginning of this year, if memory serves, took over as their late game play caller. They had some clutch time issues, but that really changed after the first like 20 or so games of the season. And Nori, I think he took over. Chris Finch openly talked about it. I don't know if that was at the start of the season or something. But yeah, he's handled some late game play calling duties. I think that's a big part of it. I think how he is also sort of just seems like he really understands people. I feel like that helps Chris Finch understand the players as well. He leans on Nori a lot. I think he also helps a lot with rotations. So yeah, I think that would be a pretty big loss. But at the same time, I think Pablo Prigioni is a guy that can
Oh,
step into
dude,
that
yeah.
role. And he's a guy that's not like Nori, because Nori is one of the best assistants in the league. But Pablo Prigioni has gotten some head coaching buzz, so I feel
Oh,
like
what
that's
was?
a natural progression. And I feel like the Timberwolves have enough infrastructure to make up for that loss. But I think Nori would be a really solid head coach. He also, I think, is a little bit more on the developmental side, whereas Chris Finch, that might not necessarily be a
Mm-hmm.
strength. I feel like that's something we've seen with Nori. Dating back to, I don't want to go on a whole tangent about the Timberwolves, but they had that huge win, I believe, in November, or maybe it was December against the Thunder, where Chris Finch gets ejected, Nori takes over. And in that game, one thing that I remember, Rob Dillingham, who obviously got traded, he didn't play a ton. I remember Nori really leaned on him, and he was playing fourth quarter minutes. He didn't close the game, but he was playing significant, meaningful minutes. And I feel like that's a thing for the Bulls team, especially that could help them just based on his player development and then offensive schemes.
Okay, that's interesting too because I know he started in or not started, but he was prior to Minnesota, I believe, 15 to 18. He was with the Nuggets helping develop Jokic. So like, okay, that's interesting. I was just wondering about that. And is it Nori? You said it's
Yeah,
Nori.
Nori.
Okay, got you. I was mispronouncing that. Then I got you. Yeah, because I don't know. I saw him as like a link to the Pelicans at one point too. So I was thinking about that. That's interesting stuff. But back to Pablo, man. I don't remember what possession it was. It could have just been like a I think maybe just it was that Nas Reed three in the corner maybe where Gobert kicked it out to him on the swing pass. I think it was that shot, but he was losing his mind on the bench after that. It was great. If you want to move on to the Nuggets, I'm ready to go at this team because I hate David Adelman so much, man. That guy is such a tool. Oh my goodness, I can't stand him.
Yeah, I think we could definitely talk about the Nuggets. I think anyone who's listening to this could tell you that their defense got exposed in this series, and it was extremely alarming. Not just hey, got exposed by Anthony Edwards. Oh, got exposed by Ayo Dosunmu now. Okay. Oh, it got exposed by Terrence Shannon in Game 6. And credit to Terrence Shannon. He deserves all the credit in the world. It was an amazing game. But seeing them have zero answer for a guy that wasn't in the Timberwolves rotation for a lot of the season, alarming. The lack of rim protection from Jokic, alarming. Uh, and then Adelman. Yeah, we got to talk about him. Kenny Beecham had this awesome tweet where it was just David Adelman's offense. Two-man game, two-man game,
I
two-man game.
just about to reference that. Oh my god. Yeah.
That's all it was.
Yeah.
And we could talk about potentially firing Adelman, but beyond that, I still think this team needs some roster
Oh
changes.
yeah.
And I think out of all the teams we're talking about, what's next for this team, this is the most interesting team. So yeah, any thoughts overall? And do you think this Nuggets window has closed, or do you think there's a potential pivot?
I think the window has closed. I don't think they're going to accept that it's closed, though. I think, you look at the amount of money they invested into this team this year for them to have two playoff wins and then pack it up and go home is really disappointing. And they're in a tough spot. Peyton Watson, I don't know what the market looks like for him, but there's going to be teams like Chicago, even the Lakers, that are going to want to throw a bag at this kid because he showed that, he's very similar to Jaden McDaniels. Like a two-way wing who can score, shoot over you. He can dunk. He can block shots. He can rebound. He can pass. Like all the tools are there to be an elite level wing. A guy in those that McDaniels, OG Anunoby tier, and those guys are at a premium in the modern NBA. So I don't know what his market looks like. You paid Christian Brown, who I think gets a little too much hate. I think he's a very situational player, and as much as he wasn't good, like I'll be honest, he wasn't good. He wasn't making threes. He wasn't really being an effective point of attack defender or any of that. I still don't think he deserves the hate he's getting, but you have Aaron Gordon locked up. Jamal Murray, I mean, if Jamal Murray was bad in the regular season, I think the discussion would be, are we going to trade Jamal Murray? I don't think that can be the case. But I think the Denver Nuggets are in a situation where they should sell off pretty much everything they can and just recoup some draft capital. And as much as it would, you're going to waste a year of Jokic's prime and Jamal Murray's prime, I think they should take a step back before they try to take another step forward because they're just going to continue to pigeonhole themselves and put them in a tough spot. I think they have to clear up as much money possible to be able to bring back Peyton Watson on a contract and just recoup some draft capital because I don't think they could do anything this summer that would have me going into next year saying they're a contender at all.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely an interesting point. I think to sign Watson, especially with his track record of ownership, not wanting to go in the second apron, traditionally known as a very cheap ownership group, they're going to have to salary dump either Cameron Johnson or Christian Brown. I think with Christian Brown, I do agree he got a little bit unfairly criticized. I thought it was a really rough series for him. but people were acting like this guy didn't have a breakout season before. The contract doesn't look great right now, but people were like, "Oh, it never made sense at the time." I was like, "Yeah, it kind of did when you look at the market and you look at the season he was coming
And
off of
Peyton
last year."
Watson was averaging like 7 points last year. Like that was the thing. Like it's just stupid NBA Twitter stuff. Also, I think Brown's contract caps out at 31 million in 29, 30 or whatever. Like that's not for that time. People are going to be making 90 million a season by that point. So it's really not that bad of a contract, especially if you can just get him back to the 15-point per game score he is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm still positive on him long term, but ultimately, right now, you're probably going to have to salary dump one of those guys to make room for Watson. And listen, guys, the Watson, I know a lot of Nuggets fans were like, "Oh, we dealt with injuries too." Yep, the Watson injury was big. The Gordon injury was big. Losing this series is still an enormous disappointment, given the expectations. And ultimately, with this Nuggets team, you look at the age of the roster: Nikola Jokic, 31, Jamal Murray, 29, Aaron Gordon, 30. The window, in my opinion, has closed when you look at teams like the Spurs, when you look at teams like the Thunder, and you look at even teams like the Timberwolves, and they're a notch below them right now, and I don't see many ways for that to change, quite frankly. You look at Aaron Gordon's injury problems as well. I think that's a massive concern. Just continuous soft tissue injuries with that recurring calf injury and hamstring injury. It's been really brutal for him, and he's a guy that I could potentially see as a trade candidate.
I was just going to say, I would salary dump Aaron Gordon before I salary dumped Cam Johnson or Christian Brown. I don't know if that's a hot take because I think he is the perfect front court piece next to Jokic with the weak side rim protection help. But $35 million for a player who's going to give me 40 games, 40 great games, and he's going to play incredibly hard and he's became a better shooter. But I think there's going to be teams out there, if you floated him, that would be really interested in him. A team like the Charlotte Hornets, I think would love a guy like Aaron Gordon. So I would look to trade Gordon. My order of operations would probably be Gordon, Cam Johnson, and then Brown.
I think it's interesting because with Gordon, my concern is defense has been horrible, especially this season. They had the 21st ranked defense. It was the worst unit in the entire playoffs, and obviously got exposed against the Timberwolves. But if you're trading Gordon, especially if it's a salary dump, there's just no way to sort of make up that defensive value, even if you're using that extra financial flexibility to re-sign Peyton Watson. I think that's a huge concern. But with the injury position or with the injury concerns, it really puts them in a difficult position where you're going to potentially have to pick between, okay, do we want to ride it out and risk injury with this guy, or do we want to just have our defense potentially plummet even further? And to me, this is where I'll give my hot take about the Nuggets. I would consider trading Jamal Murray. Quite frankly, it's a really tough position because he's coming off really a career season. Probably going to make an All-NBA team this year. He was an All-Star. The two-man game with him and Jokic has been tremendous. It led them to a championship. But when you look at your two best players being poor defenders, that was something that the Timberwolves exposed relentlessly. They kept going at specifically Jokic and Murray. And, when you look at just how great of an offensive player Jokic remains, despite having not a great series, let's be honest, he can elevate so many offensive players around him. Even if you are losing that perimeter shot creation and that three-point shooting from Murray, I think you still have a path to get back into contention. And out of all the guys, he has some real trade value, unlike some of the other players that they might look to trade. So I would consider trading Jamal Murray. I don't think it's going to be talked about a ton. I ultimately don't think it's going to be it's going to happen. But if we have a sort of out of nowhere trade, it's like, whoa, the Nuggets traded Jamal Murray for I don't know who, but whoa, they traded Jamal Murray. It wouldn't totally shock me.
I think that's a great point. I think the Nuggets should employ us because I think we could get them right. I really like the idea to trade Jamal Murray because you'd be selling him at peak value, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, but he had an Achilles injury a couple years back. Like as he gets later in his career, that's probably going to catch up to him. I mean, I don't want to put that out there necessarily, but like it's a very realistic possibility that eventually, that's going to just kick back up into something else. And he's a guy who relies on his start-stop ability. So I think selling high on him would be a great opportunity to just recoup assets and be able to properly retool this roster. I think having Nikola Jokic, if you can get him to commit to just staying in Denver and being there forever, which I don't think would be hard to do at all, and you have a younger head coach now in David Adelman that you've kind of just forced yourself to kind of be stuck with, I think retooling this roster is the best option. So I'm wondering though, like where would you trade Jamal Murray? Is it Houston? Is it Orlando? Is it like I don't really know, but I'm all for it. I think that's a really fun take. I like that.
Yeah, I definitely don't know where you're gonna trade him, to be honest. The idea that sort of has popped into my brain is like maybe something centered around him for Thompson, but I think Thompson you could probably get more, and
Hmm.
contractually that just doesn't make any sense at all. But I mean, who knows? Ultimately, I think for the Nuggets, they do need just an infusion of high quality young talent to sort of get back to true contention. When you look at their three best players hovering around the age of 30, I feel like you just need to trade one of them between Murray and Gordon. Obviously, you're not going to trade Jokic to sort of get on a more sustainable timeline
Okay,
and
let me
do
ask you a
upgrade
question.
the defense.
Let me ask you a question. I saw this on Twitter yesterday. I don't know. I don't remember who posted it. I would love to shout them up, but I don't remember who posted it. Would you trade Jokic for pick 1 and pick 4 in this year's draft?
Um,
That's
is that
exactly how
crazy
I
for saying
react.
like? Is it crazy if I? Oh man.
Okay, who would you draft at pick 1?
Well, Boozer's my number one prospect, but if you're getting pick 1 and 4, I don't know if you go Boozer Wilson. I don't know how much sense that
Right.
makes. Um, yeah, man, I might do that. I think it also depends because I know they traded one of their picks for Porter. I don't know the rest of their draft capital situation
So
off the
they
top of my head.
have they have their 20. I only know this because I'm working on something pertaining to that 20. They have their 2026 first, but they can't trade it until draft night because of the stepping rule. And then I think they don't have 28. And then I think the one they traded to the Nets was 2030. So they're in like a weird spot with picks. And I think they have like 1 second round pick in the next 4 drafts or something like that. So they're in a bad spot.
Honestly, I think I would do it though.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that's what I've. Because here's the thing, when I'm thinking about Jokic, I don't think he's a LeBron James type of guy to where he's gonna play until he's in his 40s. I think he's gonna retire somewhere in his mid 30s.
Hmm.
Quite frankly, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You look at a bunch of NBA legends, that's pretty typical. So you have like 5 6 years
Yeah.
left of Jokic, and maybe we're just overreacting to a really bad series, but
Hmm.
I think you probably have like 5 or 6 years left with him, and then to get two potential All NBA perennial guys and kickstart a rebuild, I think could be the right move. That was hypothetically on the table.
Yeah, I think we're in a position too where I think Jokic signs the extension this summer. I think it's this summer. He like it would make sense the money wise to sign the extension. I'm pretty sure he signs the extension this summer, and then that contract ends in 6 years, and he's done. Like he's and I'm not one of the people who's like he doesn't care about basketball, but I think it values family a little more than or not like the average NBA player. I shouldn't say that, but like you know what I mean. Like he just seems like he wants to go back to Serbia and just kind of chill and enjoy the fruits of his labor instead of playing till he's 43 like LeBron. So
Most definitely, yeah. So I assume you're on board with that hypothetical trade
I
for
haven't even really
Jokic.
like made a decision myself because like I said, I came into the playoffs like Jokic is the best player in the world and he's going to remind everyone of that. But yeah, I'd probably do it. I think the idea of drafting a Darren Peterson and a Caleb Wilson or AJ and Caleb or whatever combination it ends up being, like I think that'd be really fun.
That would be so
And
much
then you
fun.
bring back Peyton Watson, like that could be so cool. But never gonna happen because whatever. But yeah, just a fun
That is a really
hypothetical.
fun one to think about that I've never
Yeah,
thought about. I don't think there's any shot in hell they trade Jokic. And I think he's gonna just retire there, and
yeah.
he's gonna be a one
The
one
only
two
place
guy.
I
But
saw him ever going to was Dallas if Luca had stayed, but yeah, we know how that ended. So
yeah, for sure. I think we can pivot. Talk about our last few series. I don't think there's a ton to talk about with these teams. And the last two, we're literally just gonna be like, hey, what's next for the Suns? What's next for the Blazers? We know the Thunder and Spurs are awesome. So the Knicks closed out the Hawks last night in blowout fashion. I believe it was the
hmm
or the largest blowout in playoff history, if I'm not
hmm
mistaken, or at some point it was. But yeah, what did you see change from the Knicks side of things after going down 2-1 for them to ultimately close this series out in 6 games? And then what do you make of this Hawks team who, in my opinion, has the brightest future out of every team we're talking about?
Yeah, the Knicks. I think it was just letting Karl Anthony Towns run the offense. We've talked about this before. I'm not a Darius Cuff guy. I'm just not. I don't like the small guard thing, and I think that was kind of like that thing has kind of really became bigger in the playoffs with Jalen Brunson. I mean, he didn't struggle. He's freaking Jalen Brunson. He's gonna make shots. He's gonna be awesome. He's gonna go out and have a 38-point game, but I just think letting Karl Anthony Towns be the offense and letting it's opened the door for OG Anunoby too. I think OG Anunoby has been phenomenal, especially just from we know what he brings defensively, but from an offensive perspective, he's been awesome. I think it also just comes down to the Hawks just ran out of gas. They weren't supposed to be where they are. When they traded Trae Young, things were really ugly, and they picked it up. I think Quinn Snyder's, another guy I would put in that conversation, of coaches earlier when we were talking about Chris Finch as guys who don't get enough credit. I think Quinn Snyder is a phenomenal head coach. I think he gets a lot of flack for not being a vocal guy on the sidelines who's screaming and yelling and frantic with officials, but I think he's a brilliant basketball mind. I mean, you look back at those Utah Jazz teams, he had a group that had Donovan Mitchell as their best player, and the second scoring option was Sixth Man of the Year Jordan Clarkson, winning 60 games regularly. So when I look at what changed for the Knicks, I think it just comes down to Karl Anthony Towns being allowed to just be Karl Anthony Towns again.
Yeah, I think you really nailed it there. And then just in general, also just diversifying the offense a little bit outside of Brunson, and I think empowering Towns is central to that, especially against this Hawks team that didn't have a total perfect matchup for him. I thought that was kind of an obvious adjustment, quite frankly, and to their credit, they implemented it and they got the job done, but also just empowering OG a little bit more. Bridges is a guy that gets way too much hate. I'm sorry, Knicks fans, some of them are great. I have a ton of friends who are Knicks fans. They're great. But there's some Knicks fans online that they just go to the extreme, especially with Bridges after those first 3 games. It's like, guys, he's not even involved in the offense.
Yeah.
He was struggling, but to his credit, he really turned things around, especially in Game 6. I thought he was awesome. Defensively, he's always bringing it. And I think, they realized just how much power they have outside of Brunson, and I feel like that was a big thing for them to lean into. And that's something they're going to have to continue to do throughout this playoff run. Towns was awesome. I think we can move on to the Hawks side of things a little bit. I do think, by the way, the Knicks are probably favorites to come out of the East at this point.
Yeah, it's looking like that. It's definitely looking like that.
They're kind of a weird team because it's like I don't think they're ever going to sweep anyone. I feel like they always make things difficult for themselves in some ways, but they got to be favored to come out of the East at this point. And
I wonder how much of a fight Philly could put up against them. That's what I really wonder, because I mean, we've seen over his career, Karl Anthony Towns does not have good games against Joel Embiid, but this is also not 100% Joel Embiid. It's more like an 85%, 80% Joel Embiid. But then you have a guard who can match, Brunson's offensive production. You have a guy on the wings in Edgecombe. I still think the Knicks take it, but I don't know what I would like. I don't know how that series would go. I also wonder if the Celtics do, pull it out in Game 7, if they just shake it off and they just dust the Knicks, because that's kind of their thing. So, it'd be interesting.
I'd love to see the Celtics.
Yeah, me too. Me and you
I think
both.
my pick either way is going to be Knicks in 6, to be honest. Not what I said coming into the playoffs. I said Celtics in 7, but the Knicks, they look like they figured some things out. They're kind of, like I said, a weird team, but when they're clicking, I don't think there's anyone with a higher ceiling in the East, and they were the rightful favorites heading into the year, and they haven't been super consistent, but they're proven that they have a super high ceiling. With the Hawks, I think this is the team best positioned for the future when you look at all the open cap space they have, all the future draft capital, the potential to add a top 3 pick in this loaded class. What do you make of this Hawks offseason ahead of us? Do you think they could make a big splash, or do you think it's just sort of upgrading the margins and using that cap space in that way?
I think it depends on where the pick falls. I think if the pick jumps up in the top 3 and they can land, I think ideally for this team, you go back to the high school tape. Darren Peterson was a point guard throughout his entire high school career at Prolific Prep. So I think you throw him in, he's another bigger guard on this team, and you would have, some form of a combination of um, him, Dyson Daniels in the backcourt there is like like the three guard lineup almost, or you go to Bansa, or you even go Cam Boozer. I think any of the top three guys, even Caleb Wilson, any of those top four guys, like they'd be perfect fits with this Hawks team. So if they don't jump up into that spot, I think things look a little different. I think they go out, they trade for a center or sign a big time center, and then they draft one of the guards of, I don't see them being a team to take a cuff just because they just traded away Trae Young. But a Kingston Flemings, a LeBaron Philon, a Michael Brown Jr., even if they could get Keaton Wagler, I think they would love that. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm high on Jalen Johnson. I'm not as high on him as some people are. I'll say that.
Yeah, I'm happy you brought those points up. You can't go wrong with any of these top three guys, especially if you're Atlanta. You can sort of talk yourself into how each of them would fit. Peterson gives you that high end guard, and I think I think that's my favorite fit for Peterson across the draft, quite frankly. And then you look at AJ, potentially fitting in with that identity of length and great win play, and then you look at the possibility of Boozer. I think he's a nice front court fit with Onyeka Okongwu. So yeah, they just have so many possibilities. I mean, everyone would love to have a top three pick, but I feel like them especially are well positioned to sort of integrate any of those top three guys. And then any of the guards, I agree. About the Acuff point, I'm a big Acuff guy, but I just don't think that's the fit. I don't think that really fits their identity of size and length. Quite frankly, and I agree. Seeing some of the stuff with Brunson in the playoffs, it turns me a little bit for Acuff. But yeah, I could definitely see them adding a center. And I also agree with the point about Jalen Johnson. I think this playoff showed, and he's still young, so maybe I could be completely wrong, but I think best case scenario, he's that super co-star.
Yes.
He's a fantastic co-star, number two option. I think at some point they're gonna probably have to address that true number one, and in the draft, I think they'll be well positioned to do that.
Yeah, I think I want to circle back to they really need a center. I love Onyeka Okongwu, but I think he's way more of that Isaiah Stewart off the bench center role, but like the reverse, the offensive version of that. They need a body. They need like a big time. If they wanted to throw a bag at Jalen Duren, I wouldn't hate that. If they wanted to throw a bag at Walker Kessler, I also wouldn't hate that. But I think a sneaky addition would be Robert Williams. I think what he's done in this postseason, or he did in the postseason against Victor Wembanyama, and even when Vic was off the court, he just dominated. And he's also sneakily, like, I know you'll remember these days where, Garden Report after a Celtics game, they're talking about Robert Williams' mid-range jump shot. Like, he's progressed that further and further, and now he's like shooting threes towards the end of the season. He was really shooting the three ball. So I think he would be a fun little bridge option. I also like the idea, though, if the Hawks, stay where they're projected right now at 9, of trading back with a team, and getting 2 picks and then just kind of filling out some holes. But I don't know. I think, like you said, they're out of any team that's been eliminated, they're in the best position out of anybody.
Yeah, most definitely. I love the Robert Williams shout. I think that would be really fun. Not a guy that I had thought of before, but I think he'd be a perfect fit next to Double O in that front court. And I also think with the Conwell, one thing that really helps him is his floor spacing. It can allow him to fit with really any center. So I think he's just so malleable in that way. I think Walker Kessler or Jalen Duren could be a lot of fun. Just throw money at him. Why not? Because you have so much cap space after that Trae Young trade. I also think it should be somewhat of a priority. Probably not going to be a super long-term deal, but I would bring back CJ McCollum.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't 100%. Think he closed the series great, but at the start, my goodness, he looked like the best player in the entire series.
He said something on a podcast recently, like it kind of made it sound like he'd be fine to take a massive pay cut to sign a long-term deal. So if you can get CJ McCollum on a 40 to 45 million total, I think that's a great option, because as you get to the end of that contract, that becomes, a 1 or 2 year deal at $10 million a season becomes a great trade chip even. So yeah, I think CJ McCollum has to be back in a Hawks uniform next year.
Yeah, most definitely. And who knows where this team goes next year. Maybe they go into a little bit of a youth movement and they don't reclaim a top five spot, but I think they're well positioned to be a true threat in this Eastern Conference for years to come, and I think they're always going to be at least decently competitive over these next 2 years. And who knows? I genuinely believe this team has one of the brightest futures in the league. Jalen Johnson's still super young, and you look at all the complementary pieces, all the draft picks, the cap space. Super excited to see what they do this offseason.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
I think we can move ahead to talk about the Suns and Blazers quickly. The Suns, I'll just share my take. I feel like this could have been lightning in a bottle for them. I hate to say that. They had such a great season. It was a great story. Shout out my boy Bruce. He's a big Suns guy. But at the same time, I think so many teams in the West are getting better, and I just don't see the clear avenues for the Suns to do the same. But curious to get your opinion. They have 2 tradable first-round picks and then a lot of high salaries, so maybe it's moving off of a guy like Jalen Green or Dylan Brooks. But yeah, where do you see the Suns going from here?
Yeah, I don't really know. I think you have to find a way to use that Jalen Green money to turn it into a better fitting player, and I think that's always been their plan. I just don't know who that is. Is it Ja Morant? Is it Zion Williamson? Is it a Miles Turner even? Like and Mark Williams is another huge problem for them because him having the continued injury issues. But you gave up I think it was 2 first-round picks to get him at last year's draft. I think Malawach is going to be an absolute beast in the league. I think he has, top 10, top 15 center potential. He's just a freaking monster. The dude is a giant, and he can kind of shoot it, and he has good feel for the game. He just needs to get more reps in. But and also like a guy like Colin Gillespie, who you're gonna either have to bring back or let walk. What does he look like long term? Because as the season went on and teams just started kind of isolating him, he doesn't have those traditional lead guard skills that you need from a guy who's 6'1" to really be effective. So I don't know. They're in a tough spot. I think Jordan Ott, in my opinion, is a very great coach, a good upcoming young coach. But also we'll see, because a lot of times these first-year head coaches have incredible success, and then it's down from there. So I don't know. They're in an interesting position. I would just like to see them do something with the Jalen Green money. I'm a big Devin Booker guy, and I'm also of the faith, like, I don't think Devin Booker should ever leave Phoenix. I think he should just stay there, and I think that would do more for his reputation, because I'm very much over the idea of stars just asking out and going to new situations, because I don't know who the last star is to ask out and go to a new situation and it really benefit them. So yeah, I think they're in an interesting position. They can't make the Kawhi money work, so that's out of the question. It's just a tough spot. I think Ja Morant is probably their best option, but even like you said, it could just be a 1-year wonder, and then, yeah.
Yeah, no, you hate to say it because last year was such a train wreck, and then they really turned things around with Ott and Brooks and this new culture. But the West is getting more competitive, and I just don't know if they have any clear pathways to improve. I think a Green trade should absolutely be on the table. I definitely think it's worth kicking the tires on Zion, though.
What do you think about DeJounte Murray for Jalen Green?
I don't mind that at all, honestly. I think DeJounte, he's more of that traditional lead guard. Booker, he's awesome, but I do like him more in that combo off guard role a little bit more. So I actually do like that idea. I don't know about the Pelican side of things totally, but I could see it because Green fits their timeline a little bit more, a lot more actually. So I think that's a good move. Honestly, I think that could make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I kind of like that. I think not to go on a tangent about DeJounte Murray, but if he gets traded, he would be a guy even I would throw out for Minnesota. Whatever team he goes to next, like they better be ready for an absolute winner. I love that guy's mentality. I love his leadership skills. A lot of the Pelicans media have kind of crapped on him because there was stuff that came out that he just wanted to build up his trade value and stuff. He's an incredible leader. Like the presence the team had when he came back, it was just he's just so good at controlling the game. You can tell he developed in the Spurs system. So be interesting to see where he ends up. But yeah, the Suns are in a tough spot. They're in a tough spot. The financial situation and just the lack of assets. That's why you don't trade for superstars.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, they really shot themselves in the foot with the draft capital stuff. I also want to circle back to your point quickly about the center position because I think it's so crucial, and it's really why I'm like, I think they might have to take just a slight step back because you don't want to sign Mark Williams to a super long term deal. Maybe they can get him for a cheaper contract than I'm anticipating. But I think at some point you're going to sort of have to unleash Oso and Malawach, and that could result in a step back. But who knows? I also think just getting the power forward would be huge, and I think Zion is another fit that I really like there. So they do have some options, but I'm a little bit dubious of them replicating the success. I think we can talk about the Blazers next because they have this super interesting blend of young talent with Denny Avdia still, and then Scoot Henderson, Donovan Clinton, and then you have Drew Holiday who came in and really uplifted them, and then you have Damian Lillard, who's coming back from his Achilles injury next year. And then the one factor I do have to mention, you now have this cheap owner who is probably the cheapest owner we've ever seen, and that's the one area I'm dubious of. But otherwise, roster construction wise, I really like their infrastructure, and I think, especially with Dame coming back, they have a good chance of replicating their success. But yeah, what do you make of the Blazers?
Okay, I'm gonna throw out something interesting. I don't know if you've seen this yet. So the Blazers weren't sending scouts to Nuggets and Timberwolves games because they felt like the scout could just watch the game from home because they didn't want to spend money on sending scouts to games. Like that's wild to me. That beats the whole. I mean, I get that like the two-way players aren't allowed to play in the playoffs, so that part slightly makes a bit more sense to me. I think it's a bit weird because they're still part of the team. But yeah, that ownership thing is brutal. I did see today that they would still like to make a splash, and I know from this guy's hockey background with the Carolina Hurricanes, who've had great success over the last several years, like he does cut a lot of costs and likes to be cheaper in that sense, but he's also fully willing to just go all in and make big moves. But I think the coaching search is their biggest question mark because I think Thiago Splitter did an excellent job, and I'm not saying to the point where you give him a 5-year contract or anything, but I think you at least give him another 1-year deal to continue to prove he can do this stuff. I think they're in a fun spot though. You have, the Drew Holiday contract at about $37 million. You have the Jeremy Grant contract at about $37 million. You have guys like Denny. You have Tumani Kamara. You have Shaden Sharp. You have Scoot. And then you have the Bucks first round picks. They're a team that I would love to go see and just go all in and get a Giannis. I think that would be so much fun. I could see him fitting perfectly in with this group and their defensive infrastructure, and then him and Dame get to play together again, which would be a lot of fun. So they're in a good spot. That whether the ownership thing is very concerning, especially when it comes to their head coaching hire, not wanting to spend $1.5 million or more on a head coach, which is like an assistant head coach's rate. But other than that, I think they're in a great position to build something. And as much as I'm not a Denny guy, got to give the guy credit because he did a great job this season.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think they have been a stealth Giannis team for me, but then like once the ownership stuff came out, I was like, I don't know. But it is an interesting point about his background with the Hurricanes and the ability to still make big moves despite these really odd cost cutting measures. But yeah, I do think Giannis would fit in perfectly. They have the Bucks picks. I feel like if they want to, they could potentially pull it off, and that's the Bucks are like, hey, we're really gonna make sure to accommodate Giannis on whatever team he wants to go to. So yeah, I think that would be super interesting. But yeah, overall, I think they're in a good spot. I don't know if they're gonna rise up the standings a ton, but I think they can just be a fun and frisky playoff team for the next few years. And then as this young core grows together, who knows? I was super impressed with Scoot Henderson this playoffs. And really to close the season, I thought he closed it on a strong note, and I think that could be huge for them going forward, especially with some of the other talent they have around him. So yeah, overall, generally optimistic about the Blazers, but the coaching search will be huge, and I don't see how you don't bring Thiago back. I know the owner, he wants to save money, whatever, but Thiago, he did a tremendous job with this team, given the circumstances.
Yeah, back to the Scoot thing, too. The thing we keep seeing with Scoot is if he can consistently get the jump shot down to a 36% from three, like he will reach his potential as the guy they drafted him at number 2. It's just about getting him right on that front because he still has the control. The thing I've always said about Scoot is he was never a reckless rookie guard. I mean, rookie guards come in all the time and, they're given the ball in an NBA offense and it's like everything is just, it's too much. It's overwhelming. That was never what I saw with Scoot. He was always good at controlling the tempo. His decision-making was poor, sure, but he never struggled with that. It was always just like teams didn't have to guard him because he couldn't be a threat from the outside. So if he adds that to his game, like fully. I think they're in a great spot with him. But yeah, it's an interesting position. The Blazers, it's not time to panic or anything about this whole ownership thing, but it could eventually become that. But out of, the teams in the Western Conference that can make a splash, they're the biggest sleeper for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you nailed it with the scoop point. The 3-point shot would open up just so much for him if he can knock it down consistently. Better rim pressure and better finishing as well this season. Super encouraging signs. Super excited to see him grow. And I think having Dame and Drew there, I think that's only going to benefit him. And I think that could be a real prolific trio. In some ways, not exactly the same because no team can replicate it, but it's like kind of similar to what the Spurs have with just three really, really good ball handlers and lead guards there. And yeah, I do think they're a sleeper team. Super interested to see what they do in the offseason just because they have so many picks, so much young talent, and they have been known to surprise us.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think too it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Shaden Sharp. He feels like the odd man out to me. I mean, I'm a big fan of his, but he's another guy. I think pretty sure he shot just above 30% from three this season, which is definitely a cause for concern. This team's going to need some shooting, and sure, they're getting Damian Lillard back, but this team's going to need some shooting. So I could see him being someone that could be an unexpected trade candidate this offseason.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, we saw it in the playoffs. They weren't fully trusting him. The blend of not so great defense, not so great decision making, not so great 3-point shooting. I think it is problematic despite his undeniable gifts as a scorer. I still think he has some solid value, but especially with that contract coming up, I could see the two sides parting ways for sure.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
All right. Unless you have any closing thoughts, I think we can wrap it up here.
Yeah.
But yeah, before we officially close out the show, I just want to give you a chance to plug your work. Tell our listeners where they can find you at.
Yeah, so find me at Chris Lambert NBA on Twitter. Chris Lambert for Pelicans Debrief is all my Pelicans work. Chris Lambert at Lake Show Life is all the Lakers stuff I do. I'll be doing coverage of Game 6 tonight, post game. And then Clippers on SI, I do a couple articles a month for them. A lot of draft stuff over there. And then, yeah, thank you so much for having me on, though, man. It's been a blast. It's good. Quickest 2 hours of basketball chat I've had in a long time, so it's good.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. We'll have to do it again, especially since I know you're a big draft guy. We'll have to.
Oh.